G'day Darkrealmers, it's horror author and illustrator Michael J. Elliott here with you again, and today I'm really excited to be bringing you our very first Creepypasta story. Yep, that's right, and I'll be back with some really exciting news too, okay? Okay, Darkrealmers, well today I'm bringing you the very first creepypasta story that we're going to be featuring here on the Dark Realm Diaries. And it's an original creepypasta story that I penned myself, I think it's a really nice entry, okay? But that's not the good news. The really exciting news is that we're going to be having a sister channel. That's right, we're going to be having a new channel which will be called Tales from the Dark Realm, the Creepypasta collection. And the new channel will be only creepypasta stories, okay? So for everyone who likes short stories, something a bit quirky, something a bit mysterious, something terrifying, okay? That's going to be the go-to place, okay? Now, that doesn't mean you're going to miss out here on the Dark Realm Diaries, because I'm going to be uploading all the creepypasta stories here as well. And that's so that you can see the stories here as part of our regular broadcast. But it's also so I can check and see how people are reacting to it and which channel seems to draw the most viewers, okay? Now, the really exciting part is that I've got a brand new intro and outro made for the new channel. It is unbelievable. I found some really great designers on Fiverr, and I've also had a really wonderful trailer made for the new channel, and that's for people who flick on the channel and want to know what it's all about. Well, I had a wonderful guy, a TV producer from Serbia, who made this, and he just did a spectacular job. It is really great. So even if you don't subscribe, which of course I hope you do, Darkrealmers, go and check that out, because I'm sure you're going to like that. Okay, now, as you know, behind me here, this is my office, and this is where I record the Dark Realm Diaries. Okay? But the good news is I'm going to have a set. Well, when I say a set, Tales from the Dark Realm is going to have a sort of set. It's going to be in my spare room, which I'm setting up as a dedicated space, okay? And what you're going to see is me sitting down, presenting the stories for you with a really nice background, very suave, you know, wine table beside me and so forth. And I'll be presenting it a little bit like Roald Dahl did with Tales of the Unexpected. Of course, the big difference between him and me is that he sells a lot more books than I do, okay? But another really good, interesting, I'm so pleased about this part, is that it's not just going to be me writing stories. I'm going to have some of the world's best indie authors contributing to the channel too. Now, I've already got one friend and fellow author who's really interested in taking part. I won't name him yet because, you know, better not count your chickens before they're hatched, okay? But you're going to get some great original stories from some of the world's best authors, okay? And they're going to be all different. You're going to get a taste for these authors and their works from their creepypasta stories, okay? And I'm going to be so happy to bring those to you. And what I'll be doing is giving you a brief biog of the author and supplying you with links so you can find out more about their great works and the authors themselves, okay? So that's really, really great. Now, Tales from the Dark Realm, the new channel will be up and running soon. I'm in the process at the moment of getting the set finished and designed, clearing out space, getting the camera set up, the lighting, everything like that. So until then, you'll be able to see the creepypasta stories uploaded here, okay? And I'm trying, as I said, okay? It's really not easy to fit everything in, but I'm trying to get a creepypasta story uploaded to you every week, okay? Now, some of them will be a bit longer than others, some of them will be a little bit shorter. And the shorter ones are probably the sort of equivalent of flash fiction. Now, flash fiction in writing is, very short, intense writing, okay? So some of the creepypasta stories will be like that, okay? But I'm very pleased to be able to introduce and with some pride to say we've got our very first creepypasta for you story today, Darkrealmers, and it's a little story I penned, and it's a little bit perhaps revenge story. Okay, that's all I'll say. But the name of the story is called Lunch at Number 8. So sit back, grab a coffee, a soda, or your preferred drinking beverage, okay? Maybe get some snacks, popcorn, whatever, and sit back and enjoy Lunch at Number 8.
Elizabeth Burdock and Margaret Creswick had lived at Bishop's Way for nigh on 35 years. Elizabeth lived at number 8 and Margaret lived at number 10. Both Elizabeth and Margaret had moved into Bishop's Way as blushing brides during the Second World War. As often happens with new neighbours, a quick "good morning" metamorphed into a quick chat over the fence. Elizabeth and Margaret invited each other over for the traditional British icebreaker, the cup of tea. Over numerous cups of tea, the two ladies had discussed their lives, their likes and dislikes, and of course their husbands. If you asked either woman who was the first to invite the other over for lunch, neither lady would be able to tell you. It was in fact Margaret who asked Elizabeth over for tea and sandwiches. Thus, a Wednesday afternoon tradition was born. When both women became mothers, the friendship was cemented. Their children played together as toddlers and they attended the same school. Elizabeth had 3 children, Thomas, Vera and Mary. Margaret had 2, Joan and Lionel. Children are a wonderful adhesive to help strengthen a friendship. Elizabeth and Margaret attended all the school concerts, sports days, and various extracurricular activities. The two women shared many of life's ups and downs: weddings, engagements, the birth of grandchildren, and the sadness that comes from a bereavement. Now, I don't want to imply that the only social events that took place in Bishop's Way involved merely Elizabeth and Margaret. Many of the street residents had children who attended the same school. Naturally, Margaret and Elizabeth knew the other parents. They spoke to one another at school functions and sporting events. Many of their husbands, including Elizabeth's husband Owen and Margaret's husband Ted, drank down at the local pub. Because Elizabeth and Margaret had lived in Bishop's Way longer than anyone else, it conferred a sort of matriarchal power upon them. Whenever something like a street party needed organising, the residents deferred to Elizabeth and Margaret's seniority. When the council decided to close their branch of the library, the residents asked Margaret and Elizabeth to take up the protest. Of the two women, Elizabeth was the most vociferous. She was always quick to voice her disapproval over one thing or another. When the Weatherbys at number 27 painted their front door a hideous pink colour, Elizabeth visited them and demanded that they change it to something more in keeping with the street's character. Margaret's attitude was more one of, well, live and let live. The trouble began when Eloise Perkins died. Eloise had lived at number 12. She'd lived next door to Elizabeth. Eloise had lived at number 12 with her husband Sid for 22 years. When Sid died from a heart attack, Eloise rapidly went downhill. She stopped eating, she barely left the house, and she hardly spoke to a soul. Margaret said she was suffering from a broken heart. Nobody on Bishop's Way was really surprised when Eloise passed away quietly in her sleep a few months after Sid. Their only child, Marion, decided against selling her parents' house. She decided that renting it out would provide a nice little nest egg to fund her retirement. The relative peace and quiet of Bishop's Way was shattered when the Petersons moved into number 12. They were in a de facto relationship, something Margaret and Elizabeth didn't approve of. Judy and David had 2 boys. As far as Elizabeth and Margaret were concerned, the children already had a black mark against their name for having been born out of wedlock. The boys were 12 and 8. Margaret called them nasty little pieces of work. They would hurl obscenities at passers-by. They smoked and dropped their rubbish in the street. Everyone in the street talked about it, but only Elizabeth had the courage to do anything about it. She knocked on the Petersons' front door and demanded their mother keep a tighter rein on them. Judy Peterson simply laughed. Then she blew cigarette smoke in Elizabeth's face and slammed the front door on her. The other member of the Peterson household was their West Highland Terrier, Toby. He was a friendly dog, but he was not controlled by the Petersons. He'd freely wandered down Bishop's Way, entering residents' gardens. He'd dig holes in their lawns, mess on the grass, and scrounge through rubbish bins looking for food scraps. During their regular Wednesday lunch, Margaret and Elizabeth began to talk about the dog's antics. "He's a destructive little monster," said Elizabeth. "I suspect it's because he's never really been trained or disciplined." Elizabeth snorted derisively. "I'm sure they never bothered." "Oh, it's a shame. He's such a friendly little fellow." "That's no excuse for its behaviour." Margaret knew that it wasn't just the dog's destructive behaviour that upset Elizabeth. It had become a lot more personal. "My flower bed is utterly destroyed." Elizabeth had always been very proud of her front garden. Small though the front yards of the houses may have been, most residents of Bishop's Way took pride in them, no one more so than Elizabeth. Elizabeth's front yard was not of pinks and yellows and purples. It was a riot of all colours. That was until 2 days ago. Elizabeth had come home from town to discover her beloved petunias had been dug up. The jonquils were chewed and trampled, and flower petals and stems were strewn all over the grass. Leading out from the garden onto the footpath were a set of paw prints. The culprit was obvious. Elizabeth didn't even bother confronting the Petersons about the destruction. She went straight to the police. They listened sympathetically and promised to have a word with the Petersons. That never happened. "I've got a good mind to sue them," fumed Elizabeth. Margaret sipped her tea. "Oh, they don't look like they have a halfpenny between them." Elizabeth was not to be put off. "I'm sure there's something of value. People like the Petersons usually do have something." Margaret knew how determined Elizabeth could be and decided not to pursue the matter. A week later, Margaret was surprised to see the Peterson boys standing on her doorstep. Rather than the belligerent and cocky boys she was so accustomed to, they appeared solemn and contrite. "Excuse me, have you seen Toby?" Margaret looked surprised. "No, I haven't. I didn't even know he was missing." The younger boy nodded. "We've made these to put up. Will you put some to hand out, please, missus?" He handed Margaret a few sheets of A4 paper. There was a picture of Toby with the word "missing" in large letters across the top. Below Toby's pictures were the Petersons' contact details. Margaret couldn't help but feel sorry for the boys. Perhaps their love for Toby was their key to seeing the true nature of the boys. "I'll hand those out, and I'll keep an eye out for Toby." By the following week, Toby still hadn't been spotted. "Well, I wasn't certainly going not to help them find the wretched beast," said Elizabeth, setting the table for lunch. "I can understand how you feel, Elizabeth, especially since what he did to your garden. But if you'd just seen those boys' faces—" "The dog wouldn't be lost if they'd kept their gate secured." Margaret felt it better not to pursue the matter any further, lest Elizabeth begin a tirade about responsibility and how to be a good neighbour. "I'm sorry, Margaret. It's only sandwiches today." "Really? I thought I could smell something cooking," said Margaret, sounding a little disappointed. "It's a casserole. For the Peterson boys." Margaret was taken aback. "Elizabeth, you old fraud. Despite everything you've said, you've still made that family a meal." And Elizabeth sniffed haughtily as she poured them a cup of tea. "I may not approve of them, but I'm still a Christian, Margaret." "Turn the other cheek and all that," said Margaret a tad sarcastically. Something along those lines. "Well, bless you, Elizabeth. May be the beginning of a change for the better." "I hope you're referring to the Petersons, dear." Oh, of course," added Margaret quickly. Over their lunch of sandwiches and cakes, they spoke of many things, but mainly family matters. Margaret suddenly realised she'd forgotten to take her blood pressure pills. "Oh, Elizabeth, I'll just get myself a glass of water if you don't mind." Elizabeth gave the teapot a shake. "Would you like me to make another pot, dear?" Margaret glanced at her watch. No, thank you, Elizabeth. I'd love to stay and natter, but I'm babysitting the grandchildren this afternoon, and I shall be frightfully late." After such a lengthy friendship, it wasn't unusual for the women to enter each other's kitchens and help themselves to glasses, cups, and the like. After filling her glass with water, Margaret was taken with the aroma of the casserole. The kitchen was filled with the pleasant smells of spices and slow-cooking vegetables. The blue enamel pot stood invitingly on the stove. Margaret decided to sample the casserole. She removed the lid and breathed in the meaty aroma. Margaret grabbed the ladle, sitting on the spoon rest. She gave the casserole a stir. Large chunks of carrot and parsnip and swede came to the surface. She smiled to herself. Elizabeth could be as hard as nails, but how she was being kind. This was one of her most charitable acts, and she really was a quite charitable soul. Margaret decided to try a small sample. As she lifted the ladle to her lips, Margaret dropped her glass of water. It shattered, spraying her legs with water. Margaret let out an ear-piercing scream. Sitting in the ladle, amongst the chunks of meat and vegetables, was a gravy-stained dog collar.
Well, there you have it, Darkrealmers, our very first foray into the world of Creepypasta. I hope you've liked it. If you have, could you please give us a thumbs up? Yep. Okay, and I'd be really, really interested to hear your comments, okay? Did you like it? Did you find it creepy? Did you find it interesting? I love hearing your comments, and this is especially important because I need the feedback to help me craft and create the type of creepy story pastas that I'll be bringing you, okay? So I hope you've liked it. As I said, I had a lot of fun making this. I really did, and I'm going to have a ball making creepy pasta stories for you. So thank you so much for watching me today, Dark Realmers. And as I always say, keep in the light, okay? And I'll see you very, very soon.